students from the classroom and also the student online. We're going to have our global competence with internationalization at home course. And today we have very a privilege and very glad to have the speaker from representative of Liaison Office of South Africa, Mr. Hugh Graham Anderson, to become our speaker. His topic will be South Africa's role in the Indo-Pacific construct. Mr. Hugh Graham Anderson holds the position as representative of Liaison Office of South Africa in Taipei. Later on, I will introduce a little bit about this office, but I know Mr. Anderson, he is going to tell you more about the role of the Liaison Office. He was previously posted to South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation Emeritus and the U.S. serving as Deputy Director. Mr. Anderson also worked at South African Embassy in Austria, Finland, and Venezuela. I just talked to him, I said he's so lucky that he has been traveled to so many different countries, worked as ambassadors. So of course he learned a lot of things from the local country, and he's going to share with you about his perspective. He holds Magister Artium at University of the Free State of South Africa. With multilingual competence, he speaks English, German, and Portuguese. Anything more?
These were spoken a while ago. I don't think I'm so sure that I can still speak them properly.
Okay, no problem. But we do want you to learn Mandarin while you're in Taiwan. That's more important. And so what is Liaison Office of South Africa? Liaison Office of South Africa in Taipei aims to strengthen economic, trade, scientific, education, health, and cultural exchanges between South Africa and Taiwan. In addition, the office provides visa service to citizens of Taiwan, and the office is located at Donghua Beilu. So if you are interested to visit the office or you are interested to visit South Africa, please do contact with Mr. Anderson.
Thank you very much, Professor Yuan, for your very kind words. And thank you very much for everybody for attending. This is it's a wow, wonderful to see so many students here. I was not expecting so many, so I'm glad to see that you find my topic that I proposed quite interesting for you. My name, as the Prof indicated, is Graham Anderson, and I'm the representative of South Africa in Taiwan. I'm really honored and privileged to be here at this institution of yours, which I understand is one of the best. So I'm really honored to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. And I'm also very pleased that I've been given an opportunity to talk on this topic, which is a new topic. It's a new concept. It's something that, although it has been around a lot, it has only been receiving a lot of attention lately. You will recall that your president at the National Day reception, she also made reference to that. So it shows that it is something that's really topical at the moment. And I've been, for the past 10 years, I've been working on this topic, and I've always been writing inputs for my minister and for senior officials, and never had the opportunity actually to speak on this topic myself. So when the university said I could come and talk to you, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me finally to speak on this topic, because I've got a little bit of a different approach to what I normally had to write for the minister and for the senior officials. So I just want to make a couple of, before I start with the lecture, just mention a couple of things. And one is that, everyone is given some opportunities in life, and it's very important to make the most of it. And in the area of opportunities, I've been really very fortunate, as the Prof has mentioned, in terms of my career that spans nearly 40 years in the department. And in that 40 years, I've served in Finland and Brazil, Venezuela, with also non-residential accreditation like to Colombia and Ecuador, and to Slovenia, Slovakia at the time when I was in Vienna and Austria. And then the big part of my career was in the last part before I came to Taiwan, was when I was seconded to the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which is its secretariat is in Mauritius. And this is where this whole concept of this Indo-Pacific started for us. So if you take the 6 years in Mauritius and the 4 years before I came here, it makes 10 years that I've been working on this topic. In terms of my opportunities that I had, I just want to mention that I was part of a two-man South African delegation to the first climate change conference on the ECHO 92 conference that took place in Rio de Janeiro. And then a couple of years after that, in 2011, I was again designated as the speechwriter for the South African president of the COP17. So I had twice been dealing with climate change. I also participated in the democratization process of South Africa in a small way to extent. But I mean, that was also saw the release of President Mandela at the time and watched him becoming president and did the things that he did. Also, when I'm talking about that, that was one of my areas where I had a big disappointment because you always think people will be around forever. And I was standing away from him, about 5 meters away from him, and I thought, you know, shall I go and greet him? Or shall I wait for a better opportunity? And then you say to yourself, no, wait for another opportunity, which never came. So I never had that opportunity to actually meet him. Then I also took part in the first meeting of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation in the South Atlantic. And that information that I gained there, I could also take over when we started talking about the Zone of Peace and Cooperation in the Indian Ocean, which is very much a part of this Indo-Pacific construct. And then also I saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I saw the end of the Cold War, which was a very important part in my career planning as well, because that was my other disappointment when I was busy with my master's. I did my master's on the international state stratification theory, which basically comes down to it that you have superpowers, great powers, middle powers, small powers, and all of that was of course based on the Cold War. So I was probably 6 months into my studies, and then you switch on the television, and there you see the people sitting on the wall in Berlin and chopping it down. You say, well, there goes my whole theory. So that's another thing, you know, you better work faster when you want to do something, you know, take it too slow, you know. So anyway, so that is my introduction that I just wanted to deviate a bit from the topic. Anyway, South Africa has been following the developments in the Indo-Pacific concept region as it has been evolving over the years. And we have taken note of various strategies because many countries came with their ideas of how they see this, how do they see the Indo-Pacific construct unfold. And we saw that from countries like EU member states like Germany and France, which we met with. The Germans would say that they already started this scenario during the Second World War because one of the theaters of action that they used was the Indo-Pacific. So in Japan also, the same thing. Japan also had that same position that they have been dealing with this topic already for quite some time. So, and then also, when during the recently held Ketagalan Forum that was recently held, the topic was the 2022 Indo-Pacific Security Dialogue. And that included really top speakers. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to listen to that forum, which is probably one of your top think tanks anyway. And the speakers that were speaking there were really, I mean, that was really top people. I will talk a little bit more about that. And from all these interventions that we have seen taking place, South Africa then developed its own position. You see, we listened to what these other countries were saying, and then we were seeing how could we specifically integrate the Western Indian Ocean of the southeastern and northeastern coast of Africa into this discussion. Because what we have found throughout all of these discussions is that everybody talks about the concept, but they never include Africa. And if you think about it, Africa needs to be included in this discussion. So the whole focus of South Africa's approach towards the construct is that Africa should be included into this discussion. We cannot continue with this discussion without Africa. Not only South Africa, Africa as a whole. So to get to my second slide, on the Ketagalan Forum, which was held on the 26th of July, here in Taipei. And there were extremely important speakers like Mr. Taro Kono and Keisuke Suzuki from the House of Representatives of Japan, Bill Haggerty and Mr. Roger Wicker, US Senators, Christopher Payne, who was the former Minister of Defense from Australia, and retired General Jim Mattis former Secretary of Defense of the USA, Yasuhide Nakayama, former State Minister of Defense of Japan. So these were really, really prominent speakers that they brought into Taiwan to talk about this topic. And also at this forum, Africa was not mentioned. They talked about everything except the involvement of Africa in this. And if you look at the Indian Ocean side of the Indo-Pacific, we have Comoros, Kenya, Madagascar, Mauritius, Mozambique, Seychelles, South Africa, Tanzania, Somalia, Djibouti, and France Reunion. It's 11 countries that are not being included in this discussion. Some of them are small, granted, but they all have a voice. And for them, this is a very important concept. We have seen that in the discussions when we talk from the African perspective, and you hear what these countries are saying, you can see this is a very important topic for them, and we cannot ignore them any further. We have to include them. And this is something that I hope in this discussion today, that you will also remember that if you ever get involved in these discussions, that you cannot have these discussions with Africa involved in it. So for us in South Africa, this is the major piece of the puzzle that's missing and which needs to be included. Next slide. South Africa as a country is very fortunate to be washed by the two oceans, the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. And we have recognized already a long time ago the importance of the oceans and our seas for our own development, as well as for the development of the African continent. If you look at the world map, 70% of Earth is covered in oceans. So you can just imagine the value the oceans bring to the planet. South Africa therefore unveiled its oceans economy strategy, which is called Operation Pakisa, which is a Tswana word for hurry up, in 2014, and to fully harness the potential of our ocean economy. Because if you look at the ocean and you see what is there, it's just absolutely incredible. So I'll get back to the point of South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, and Namibia, which have established the Zone of Peace and Cooperation for the South Atlantic already in the 1990s, and where I was involved in that. The main focus of that Zone of Peace in the South Atlantic was the fact that they found that many ships were bringing nuclear waste through the South Atlantic around the coast, because they knew that there were not much control over these seas. So they brought these nuclear waste, and I don't know where they took them. So this was, in a way, a safeguarding that this nuclear waste would not be traveling through the South Atlantic. And then the same was then developed for the Zone of Peace and Cooperation and Security for the Indian Ocean, which was also brought together in the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 61/105. Because you will recall that in the Indian Ocean has become quite notorious for piracy. There was smuggling, if they stop piracy on one side, then those pirates just use their channels and their resources for something else. They either smuggle people, or they smuggle weapons, or they smuggle drugs. They just move from the one to the next. So this Zone of Peace in the Indian Ocean also would have become for us a critical important thing for the future Indo-Pacific construct. For us, it is very important that it must be people-centered, people-driven, and address the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment to ensure that nobody is left behind. Because as I was saying, the resources of the oceans is phenomenal. And if you can harness these resources of the oceans, you can address these triple challenges so much better. There's a lot of money in ocean development, and we haven't even yet scratched the surface of what is available in the oceans. South Africa's view of the Indo-Pacific is shaped by its key pillars of its foreign policy, which includes advancing the Africa agenda, regional economic integration, South-South cooperation, North-South cooperation, and ensuring multilateralism is at the center of a rules-based international order. This is critically important for us. So therefore, the key elements of the Indo-Pacific construct would be advancing a global community that ensures peace, security, stability, democracy, human rights, women's empowerment, sustainable development, and protection of the environment. So where many countries would see this as a place where there could be confrontation and conflict and try to contain things, we, from the South African perspective, see this, that if all these elements are there, this can become quite a remarkable area of development and prosperity for the world and for the region in a whole. Therefore, it's important for us that the Indo-Pacific must be a rules-based, multilateral global order with respect for international law, and the multilateral institutions such as the International Maritime Organization and the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Seas must guide the interactions in the Indo-Pacific region. These rules must be applied. This is critically important for us. Of concern, and as I've mentioned, is that some countries may view the Indo-Pacific purely from a political perspective and even as a strategy for containment. And we believe that after all these national and regional strategies have been articulated by the countries that put those forward, that we have to find the convergence and the common ground, and rather than looking for differentiation, contestation, and competition. So, although all these countries have their positions on what the Indo-Pacific should be, we should get all of these, we should get together as a collective and get all these positions together and then glean from that, cherry pick from that, the ones that are best, that will ensure the development and the peace and prosperity in the region. Therefore, the focus should be on, as I said, on collaboration, cooperation, and common development for the mutual benefit of all. We believe that if these fundamental values and principles are being underpinned by a rules-based Indo-Pacific, the construct can be a major force for global good. And this is where we are going with this. During the Africa Union Summit in South Africa in 2015, they declared 2015 to 2025 as the decade of the seas and the oceans. And we decided that 25 July will be declared as the Africa's Day for the Seas and the Oceans. So that shows you how much importance the African continent is putting on the oceans and the seas. Also, the AU Agenda 2063 aims at a prosperous Africa based on an inclusive growth and sustainable development on prospects for the continent's oceans economy. Africa's ocean economy, which is 3 times the size of its land mass, should be a major contributor to future continental transformation and growth. And the AU's 2050 Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy, the 2050 aims, encourage states to create an oceans economy that could foster wealth creation and development through coordinated and sustainable maritime industries. As I said in the beginning, we have not even scratched the surface of what the oceans have to offer. So, I mean, if countries, especially African countries, where we in our developmental phase, if they can really get into exploitation of the oceans, this will address a lot of issues on the continent. So, Africa has recognized that achieving a balance between ocean health and development is necessary as an integrated part of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. From this, what we discussed now, it is very clear that the Indo-Pacific plays a critical role in the economic development of the continent. Although, as you can also understand, many of the African countries are landlocked countries, so also they must be able to benefit and glean from this whole concept. And therefore, Africa needs to work together with other regional players to ensure that the Indo-Pacific region becomes an important entity in fostering peace, cooperation, and collaboration in harnessing the full potential of the region to the benefit of the global community. From these, we have the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 61/105, which I mentioned, which declared the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace, security, and development. And we believe that this resolution should also be applied to the Indo-Pacific region when that is now more formalized. The question is, why a zone of peace and security and development? Why it is important? Because the oceans are being threatened on an unprecedented scale. This includes piracy, the smuggling of people, drugs, weapons, and pollution of the ocean, and IUU fishing, amongst others. Piracy, smuggling, and pollution are clear. We know what the issues they are. But the one that is often overlooked is IUU fishing, which is illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. And this, at the moment, tops the maritime security threats, and current statistics gives us really a worrying picture of what is happening in this area. Because you see that there's a lack of effective oceans governance, and which, I mean, these resources are just caught out like you cannot imagine. It's depleting the resources of our inheritance in the Indian Ocean. We have seen, I do not know if any of you have ever seen the size of these fishing trawlers that are fishing in the Indian Ocean. I mean, these things are the size of, I don't know, 3-4 soccer fields. And because they process everything, they catch and process and export from these vessels. They are huge. And most of these, they have no control over what they pull in those nets. So a lot of endangered species are all just pulled into those nets, and I can promise you one thing, they don't return them to the sea. They just go somewhere, I don't know, get processed for pet food or something in that matter. So this is really something that is really a problem for us in the region, because in the end of the day, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean is our inheritance. If we don't take care of it, nobody else will. So this is very important that we keep a close eye on what is happening there. And therefore, the only way forward is a credible and effective ocean governance, and therefore the importance of forging partnerships and securing global approach and the unifying of all role players. I recall some years ago, Somalia. Somalia has been always the country that has been identified as where we talked about the Somali pirates. And there was a time when we decided that maybe we should bring Somalia in to become a member of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. And after a long discussion, because member states were not too eager about that, eventually they said, okay, bring in Somalia as a member state. And since Somalia became a member state, piracy disappeared. There were no more Somali pirates. There was one incident where a ship was hijacked, and within 2 weeks they gave it back. No ransom, nothing. They just said, give it back. Because it was so important for them to be part of some kind of international grouping that were respecting them. So piracy immediately stopped. To talk a little bit about the Indian Ocean region, which includes, that's when I come back to say that you can't talk about the Indo-Pacific if you don't include Africa in this discussion. And the Indian Ocean region, this is where the African part of the Indo-Pacific is. There's already, as I mentioned, 11 African countries that's part of this coast that borders the Indian Ocean and therefore part of the Indo-Pacific. On the Gulf side, we have Iran, Oman, Yemen, and the UAE. On the South Asia side, we have Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Myanmar, and the Maldives. And the southeastern Indian Ocean, Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. And from the South African side, we perceive the Indian Ocean as a strategic platform, as I said, our inheritance, to pursue our domestic priorities, which includes the South Africa's National Development Plan, which is the plan that South Africa has to eliminate poverty and to reduce inequality by 2030 through job creation, education, skills, and health, amongst others. And then also, as I mentioned, that South Africa's Operation Pakisa, which is the focus on unlocking the economic potential of South Africa's oceans, which is both the Indian and the Pacific. And it's been estimated that if we can really bring this in very well, it can add to $10 billion to our country's GDP. I put in here just a small map to show you where the African side is. This is the Indian Ocean, the side, the Pacific. So these are the countries all along the coast and also the islands that are part of the Indian Ocean. Shows you can't deal with the Indo-Pacific without including those African countries. Why is the Indian Ocean important to South Africa and Africa? The new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, to reduce poverty, place Africa on a sustainable development path to stop marginalization of the continent and especially the empowerment of women in this process. We're talking about AU Agenda 2063. This is the Africa we want, which constitutes the major plan to transform Africa into a global powerhouse of the future. The Indian Ocean, although it's not the biggest, is the third largest ocean. It carries half of the world's container ships, 1/3 of its bulk cargo traffic, and 2/3 of the world's oil shipments. It is a lifeline for international trade and economic development, has 1/3 of the world's population, produces goods and services worth over $1 trillion. It is rich in strategic and precious minerals and metals, marine resources, agricultural wealth, significant human resources, and considerable technological capabilities. That shows you just the value of this ocean for us. So we're back to the new Partnership of Africa's Development to reduce poverty and put Africa on a sustainable development path and to stop marginalization of the continent, to empower women. The AU Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want, which constitutes the master plan to transform Africa into a global powerhouse of the future. And then the 2050 Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy aims to foster increased wealth, creation of Africa's oceans and seas by developing a sustainable, thriving oceans economy in a secure and environmentally sustainable manner. And then, of course, Agenda 23, which is a plan for action for the people, the planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership to achieve the 17 SDGs, right? And then in conclusion, is the importance to ensure that we achieve all of this in terms of the Indo-Pacific, and to ensure that it will bring this development and prosperity to the region. We have to make sure that we build this, that we create this on building mutual trust, and to enable the partnerships and promote dialogue among the countries in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, with the aim of ensuring peace, prosperity, cooperation, security, and stability for all. This is critically important because we have to build this trust in the region. We also have to strengthen the management mechanisms, including through the promotion and the protection of rules-based institutions that can deliver the security and prosperity for all in a transparent, stable, and inclusive manner. And then we have to enhance the coordination and collaboration among the stakeholders in the Indo-Pacific by developing an inclusive and robust maritime safety and security architecture through a broad range of initiatives and activities to respond to these emergencies that we will always have. And then we have to promote conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources for the sustainable development as articulated in the UN SDGs, particularly SDG 14, which is to conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources, life below water, of course. And then my bottom line remains, importance of effective oceans governance. That will be the only way forward to ensure that we have this area that is there for development. So thank you. I hope that this gives you an idea of where we will be going with the Indo-Pacific construct. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll then have the QA session. So we'll open to the audience from the classroom. So if you have any question, please raise your hand.
You told us something about the IUU, the illegal, unregistered, something else.
Unregulated fishing.
I watched the documentary stating how if there's like illegal fishing, they can track it with satellites. So I was wondering, is this really true? Is this happening? And can you tell us some more about this? And if it's a big problem in South Africa as well.
This is a serious problem because you have on all the oceans, you have the economic zones that belong to the countries, and then you have the international seas where whatever can happen there can happen. But you do not find so much fish in the open seas. The fish are more towards your closer to the coastlines. Many of the countries that are bordering these oceans do not have the resources and the capacity to control and protect their coasts. So you get these illegal fishing coming in. So they pick them up on the satellites that you are saying. But to control them is very, very difficult. Even for South Africa, because we have quite a big coast. I mean, it goes all around. And to control it is very difficult. It's really big areas that we are looking at here. So for these trawlers to move in and do the illegal fishing, it's very easy to do that. And it is, as I said, this is probably the biggest security threat that we have, is this illegal and unregulated fishing that's taking place. Because I remember somebody was telling, especially when I was in Mauritius, they said that a couple of years ago, the size of a tuna was this big, And now you look at the tuna that they take out of the ocean, they're really not that big anymore as they used to be, because they don't get the chance to grow to the size that they're supposed to be because they are just fishing them all the time. So this is seriously something that we have to look at. And we are looking at that with our partners within the Indian Ocean, and also probably on the Pacific side, they will probably do the same thing. The only way to do it is to have partnerships and to talk about these things when you have, because, for example, in the Indian Ocean Association, we have the P5 countries are members, are dialogue partners. They're not members, but dialogue partners of the association. So you can consult with them on a regular basis, say, please, we need assistance with this, we need assistance with that. And that helps. That's where the partnerships comes in, which is very important.
Hello, my name is Rob, and I am a freshman from the Department of Economics. So since this is week 6 of this class, I've been listening a lot of lectures about different countries, and all of them until now were a general introduction on what the country is about. So I was honestly expecting an introduction on South Africa, but I was really fascinated how you chose to talk about the relationship between South Africa and the Indo-Pacific. So it is a question towards probably personally you. I wanted to ask how you as an individual got interested into this topic and decided to talk about this topic to us today.
Thank you. I particularly decided not to talk about South Africa because I wanted this opportunity to speak about the Indo-Pacific, so I thought this would be a great time to talk about that. When I've been dealing with the Indian Ocean for the past 10 years, and in this process, the Pacific side just came into the discussion. So it is something that you couldn't ignore anymore. You had to deal with it. So in that process, that's where I became interested in the whole idea of the Indo-Pacific. It's a new concept. Everybody is talking about it. And I think it's a good time to get involved in that. And that's how I became interested in that.
Okay, thank you so much. So my name is Steven, and I am the 4th-year student of agronomy. And so I read about the article, and in this article it mentioned about the blue economy. Can you explain about what is blue economy, and will it be beneficial for the relationship between South Africa and Indo-Pacific countries? Thank you.
I just didn't, what was the last part? The South
Can
Africa
you
and
repeat the last part?
You said South Africa, the relation between South Africa and what?
And Indo-Pacific countries.
In the blue economy.
Yeah.
Okay. In the Indian Ocean Rim Association, the blue economy was incorporated as one of the priority areas of the association under the chairship of Australia. And this has been, it's upstream, downstream, it's everything that is involved in that. So, I mean, as soon as you start talking about oceans, the blue economy is part of that. There's a difference between oceans economy and blue economy. Oceans economy is focused completely on the oceans. On the Indian Ocean side, we prefer to talk about the blue economy because that would also include your lakes and your rivers and everything to do with water is then included. They're not just focusing on the ocean. So we looked a little bit broader than just the ocean economy. But you have to, I mean, the ocean economy or the blue economy is completely the focus area of the ocean. So when you talk Pacific, Indian Ocean, Atlantic, any ocean, the blue economy is the critical part of that. For example, if you look at the Atlantic Ocean and you see, for example, the coast of Namibia, the Namibian coast is probably the main breeding ground of fish for most of that ocean. And the control over that coast is not really very good because it's so huge and Namibia doesn't have all those resources. So this is something that must become, for example, a more international cooperation plan, how to control and manage and protect that area because of being a breeding ground for fish for half of the world. Yeah.
Okay, we also have a lot of questions from Slido, so can we look at the Slido? How does the government deal with the pollution from mining to protect environment and residents?
Can I maybe adjust this question because it's an important question, but on the mining side, I mean, this is more domestic issue for South Africa. It's not so much to do with the ocean part. But an interesting thing is I attended a lecture by the World Bank a couple of years ago in which they were talking about marine or plastic pollution, which is a major issue, especially in the Indian Ocean. They say that on the way to Australia, there's because of the sea streams, there's a collection of pollution and debris in the ocean that's the size of close to a continent. Well, anyway, and this is floating there. And the World Bank made a very good presentation in the sense that they said they have the technology, they have the know-how to really clean out the ocean from its debris. All they need is the political will to do this. And this seems to be, I do not know why this is the problem, but this apparently is the problem, that they cannot get enough political support to start this process of cleaning. Because at the moment they say whatever fish you catch and you eat, it has already some minute molecules of plastic is already in the system. And therefore all of us already have this already in the system as well. They say in a matter of time, you're going to do some deep sea diving to look at plastic waste in the ocean, because it is really something that is a serious problem for us. And we have the technology and we have the know-how how to clean that out. They must just do it.
Okay, and the next question is, Chinese government has contributed a lot to the development of entire Africa, and some are politically in favor of it. Could I have your opinion? You talk about Chinese, is from mainland China or Taiwan? Or both? Mainland China?
Yeah, I think he's referring to mainland China, which is true. China is a dialogue partner, and they are a very active member of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. They contribute financially, they contribute with expertise and with know-how, and they're always ready to support and contribute to this. So they are a very active player in the development of the region. And they've been tasked to do some research specifically on tuna fishing, the status of that, and also on solar technologies and all kinds of technologies where they are good at. So they are a very active participant and active player and active member in this whole Indo-Pacific construct. That comes back to the point that I made, that you have to have partnerships. And no matter, in the end of the day, you don't care whether what is the political background or what they think or what they want to do. It's about getting the partnership for the protection of these oceans. This is what it is about. That is the bottom line. These other things are not really important. It's to protect the oceans. That's what it's about.
Indeed. Okay, so the next question is about the ocean too. So far, which countries are in charge of building governance of the ocean? Do they face any problems from the active illegal forces or other countries?
Yeah, this is not so easy. I mean, we have all those mechanisms that deals with the oceans, and I mean, it's part of the UN system, and countries are elected to those positions. And but you know, in the multilateral system, it's the system we have. It is not completely perfect. There's still some parts of it that's struggling. Although we do believe that the countries that are responsible to or in charge of this, that they are doing their best to see to it that we do the right thing. We have the UNFCCC that deals with the environment and with climate change and with all those things. And I mean, these guys are serious, meeting regularly, doing things, and which the oceans is part of that, of course. So I believe we still need a lot of goodwill. We saw that the US for some time left the climate change discussions, then they come back again. These are the big players, you know. I don't know how much Russia will now be involved in climate change discussions, where they're facing the other problems. And so there's always something that interferes, or, you know, so it's difficult to get things moving. And the countries, all of them have a vested interest into climate change. And it's a very difficult topic to deal with. And for example, during my time at the Indian Ocean Rim Association, we tried to avoid discussions on climate change because it is so complex and complicated. And we were of the opinion that you have all these UN organizations or institutions that deal with that. Leave it to them to deal with it. But you can't stay out of it. Sooner or later, you have to get involved. If you want to get things done and fixed up, then you have to start getting involved in these discussions. It is going better. Every year, the climate change discussions, according to my reading of it, gets better. And I think that the countries understand that we have to become more serious about this.
How do we find a common ground for the countries in the region, while many of them are still influenced by the history of mostly European imperial colonialism?
You see, this is where I believe this question is answered by the way the Indian Ocean Rim Association operates. Is that they have the member states, and it's only the member states can become members. So since 1997, the membership criteria were decided, and they said those countries whose shores are washed by the Indian Ocean, they become member states. But to get this whole process of not only partnerships, but also to get the big players to understand the situation better and our plight, is to bring them in as dialogue partners and to engage them in the discussion. That's why we brought in, the P5 members are all there. We brought in Germany, we brought in Italy, we brought in Turkey. Of course, you can't have more dialogue partners than member states, so you have to have a cut-off somewhere. But if you have the big players there, the ones that knows, that has the technologies, that probably also, in most of the cases, they're also probably the big fishers that fish and exploit your oceans. When you get them involved, they also understand better what your problems are and how they can assist you. And I think in terms of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, by bringing in these countries, they get more involved, they participate more in the discussions, and it definitely has a positive spin-off out of that, I would think.
Okay, in what ways are ordinary citizens of South Africa going to profit from a close Indo-Pacific collaboration?
Well, I think that must be quite obvious because, I mean, by just looking at the resources of the Indian Ocean, which we are now in the process of exploiting through our Operation Pakisa, by making it even broader to include the Pacific, it's just so much more resources that becomes available and just so much more people involved. So I think South Africa is already profiting from the Indian Ocean collaboration. So the Pacific, bringing in the Pacific will just make it so much broader and just so much more resources available.
Okay, you have mentioned that one of the targets of NEPAD is empowering the woman. I wonder, is there any specific policy that has been carried out in your country?
Yes, we have, in the presidency, we have a Department for Women. And we have, in South Africa, all our policies has a very strong women's economic empowerment component to that. So if the government does procurement, there needs to be, in the procurement process, there needs to be so many women companies included in the process. If you have delegations going for meetings abroad, there needs to be so many women delegates included in the process. So I think in terms of NEPAD has set the scene that gender equality needs to be considered in everything that you do, whether it's also in the private sector in South Africa. Women's economic empowerment is really a serious component. Also South Africa also brought this, together with Australia, we brought this into the Indian Ocean Rim Association as well, that your delegations that attend to IORA meetings have to have a 50% gender balance in them. However, that is not always possible because if you look at your smaller countries, the expertise is a little bit different, or the constitution of the expertise. Because you can't just take women along if they have no expertise in that field. So you have to also keep that in mind. So you can't really enforce and say it must be 50-50. But at least there's that awareness is created that you have to look at that and make sure that you have your gender balance in your delegations, in your procurement, in whatever you do, that there's some gender balance being brought in.
I see, yeah. What challenge do South Africa commonly face as a country that gets marginalized often? I want to understand how we can be more inclusive on this issue.
Well, I'm not so sure that South Africa gets marginalized often, because I think we are quite vocal when it comes to any topic. You know, we just got elected to the Human Rights Council again at the UN. It's our third time that we've been elected to that. So I don't think we don't allow to get easily marginalized. We speak our mind, and we participate in all the international organizations, which I've been saying that we need this important of these international mechanisms to manage things. South Africa is involved in all of those. So I think we are quite where we want to be. And what makes South Africa also quite different is that we always pursue the African agenda, and we always look out for our African colleagues to see that they are not marginalized. This is where this whole discussion of the Indo-Pacific is on, is that don't marginalize Africa in the process. They have to be part of the discussion. So where South Africa is involved, this is the point that we always push, that Africa must be involved. I remember that France, a year or so ago, they had a big event on the Indo-Pacific, and they invited the Minister of Foreign Affairs of South Africa. And the focus of our discussion was this fact exactly, that you cannot marginalize Africa out of this discussion. So we also take care of bringing Africa into the discussion.
And I agree that multilateralism is crucial in this highly internationalized world. Yet, what can we do to try to avoid or to reduce problems like disputes? Thanks.
South Africa has always been a strong supporter of negotiations. Because no matter what happens, if there's a conflict, sooner or later, those conflicting parties will have to go to the negotiating table. It has to happen sooner or later. So South Africa's position is to avoid all of this death and destruction. Why don't you go straight into negotiations? Because you're going to go negotiate sooner or later. So don't waste time and go straight. But that's not always possible, as we can see what is happening in the world today. And it's something that we try to push the point and really impress upon conflicting parties how to do this. Because South Africa is an example. I mean, if you look at 30 years ago when South Africa was going through its apartheid time, nobody really thought that it would be possible that you would be able to find a peaceful solution to South Africa, and they did. So that stressed the point that negotiations is the bottom line, and you can find a solution to any problem. No matter what the issues is, they can be sorted out and compromise can be reached.
Yeah. And how does South Africa manage to strike a balance between the ocean exploration and ocean health?
Yes, very good question. And that's a bit beyond my expertise, really. But I know that within Operation Pakisa, our Ministry of Environment is very much involved in that to make sure that the exploitation and the health of the ocean is completely balanced. And I think that most countries probably do that. I think they know that you cannot just exploit by damaging. We have many situations. For example, there's a part of the coast where Shell wanted to do some fracking, and which the local communities just said that this is too much of a problem in too much of environmental impact, that they're not going to agree to that, and in the end they had to stop that, and they couldn't continue with the fracking to take place. So I think that in South Africa, I can't talk so much of the other countries, but in South Africa I know our Ministry of Environment is participating in all these meetings where there's exploitation taking place to see that the environment is not damaged in the process. So I think we are doing quite well there.
I see, yeah. And so similar question is asking what kind of potential resources can South Africa harness from the Indian Ocean? Can you please provide some practical example or policies?
Well, from the ocean comes gas. There's some huge gas fields now off the coast of Mozambique, and also on South African coast, so gas reserves. I mean, there's minerals and metals that can be mined from the ocean floor. And I mean, there's all the minerals that you find on Earth, you also, on the land, you will also find in the ocean. So this is, I think, what the ocean is offering for us, not only as for food security and all of that. Quite an interesting thing was, I do not know if any of you know, but a year or two ago, Cape Town, for example, was under severe pressure because they had no water, because of drought. And there's a South African company with South African technology on desalination. And they had a meeting with the Cape Town local government long before this drought was taking place. And they said that the technology that they have is that through desalination, they can actually ensure that Cape Town will never be without water. But there was some negotiation breakdown about something, so it didn't continue that well. And this company then moved to Saudi Arabia to use their technology there. And I think, that with the technology that we have available in the world today, we can actually address any problem that we have, and it can be fixed, to be quite honest.
What strategies has South Africa implemented to improve the awareness of ocean health in its people?
As I mentioned, our Ministry of Environment is quite active in that, and I think they are, as I recall, they have programs in the schools, primary and high schools, in where they have some input in the curriculum about ocean health and so on. So it is something that we do pursue, I think, with the Department of Education probably. I'm not too sure about that question. I will have to go and check on that. But I recall something that the Ministry of Environment they have some kind of program with schools as well.
I see. Okay, how do Indo-Pacific countries cooperate to protect the ocean while maintaining the need of utilization of ocean resources for economic growth if needed? So like a previous, you already mentioned, like the compromise, the same.
The compromise,
yeah. Okay, I heard that there are pirates in the Indian Ocean. Is there any solution to this problem?
The pirate problem, I think, in the Indian Ocean has more or less been resolved, because there hasn't been, not that I recall, in the past 2-3 years, I have not seen any incidents of piracy in the Indian Ocean. But as I said, if there's not pirates, they use their resources for something else. So there's always a movement of criminal activities in the Indian Ocean. However, what they have done is, France is a member state of the Indian Ocean Association. So their Navy is patrolling, they have their bases, and there's quite a lot of patrolling taking place. Also with India and France are cooperating, using each other's naval bases to patrol and control the ocean. And I think the countries that have the resources, they will control their own economic zones and so on, and they will cooperate through, there's the EONS, which is an organization of all the navies of the Indian Ocean Rim. And they meet I think on a quarterly basis, and they exchange information. So whether it's satellite information or information that's picked up by the navies, they share this. So they watch it. But still, the ocean is still a big area to cover and so on. But as I said, the piracy, I think that we have more or less addressed because of the cooperation that has been taking place through the association. Yeah.
Is South Africa going to ensure that Operation FASCA promotes sustainability? How will they do that?
Well, I think Operation Pakisa has been built exactly on this sustainability. This is the whole idea, is that we have to take more from our ocean and use it sustainably and so on. So I think, everything in Operation Pakisa is built on sustainability and protection and conservation and all of that. So I am not concerned that there's something there that will be creating a problem in terms of sustainability.
Could the lack of cooperation between the countries and Africa be due to no joint operation to use its resources? A sort of resistant, modern, big push model? I'm sorry, I don't know.
I don't know that model.
Yeah. So the student want to explain, is this student in the classroom, you want to explain? Yes?
So I wanted to know, like, because probably there are companies who want to use Africa's resources, but like if they do it by themselves, the costs are too high. So perhaps they need to do a big push model where everybody cooperates together to be able to use Africa's resources.
What in the Indian Ocean Rim Association, I'm sorry that I always go back to that, but that is the organization, the only organization in the Indian Ocean that deals with this. And the focus of that organization is development and progress and upliftment. So most of the meetings that they do is to see how the member states can cooperate in various fields. So whether it's women empowerment and taking seaweed and producing food or something like that, they get the technology, and then they put them. They have training and developmental projects to get everybody involved. So, and this is taking place on a regular basis. I mean, there's probably 4 training programs per month taking place where all the member states are invited. And what we normally do, we have developed a system which is very good, where we can put together a program with very little money. I'm talking about, say, in the field of $60,000. You can put a program together and you can get every single country to send a single person on the cost of the Secretariat, covered within the $60,000 to attend that meeting, with the hope that they will go back and then do the training to their own people in their own country. So it's working very well. There's a lot of training programs taking place.
What do the youth South Africans think about the Indo-Pacific construct?
I think, it is a new topic, but I think, like you have in Taiwan, you have Oceans University, correct? Yeah. So South Africa also, the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in Port Elizabeth is a university that focuses on the ocean. So those students that are interested in that topic, they will probably enroll at that university to learn more about ocean health and how to deal with the ocean. It is something that is part of the Operation Pakisa, where they will get more involved in the schools as well, to bring maybe some part of it to give some education on how to deal with the oceans and so on. But it's something that's still also in a developmental phase, I think. We will get there in due course, I think. So, but we have a university that specializes in that.
Okay. Any question from the students in the classroom? Yes?
My name is Belinda. I'm from accounting department, and I'm from Indonesia. And I want to ask, what is the most important thing the South Africa focus on to the Indian Ocean.
Indian Ocean Rim.
Yeah.
Thank you. The most important thing for us in the Indian Ocean is that it must be a zone of peace for cooperation and development. It must be peaceful, and because you can't develop if you don't have peace in that region. So for us, the most important thing is peace. That's it. And that is what everything we do, that is the focus area. The other things will come in due course, to glean from it, to get gas from it. Because we also do that. But if you don't have peace, you can't have development. Simple as that. So focus is peace.
Any question from the students in the class? I know today you talk a lot about Indo-Pacific, about the ocean, and I'm a wildlife biologist. I study a lot of land wildlife, animals. So I know South Africa has a lot of wildlife in the safari and forest. And from the past, we know rhino has faced a lot of problems and a lot of threat. It killed for the horn. And a lot of time the horn was used for traditional medicine. But I know the white rhino has been thrived. The population has grown a lot. So in South Africa now they allow for certain quota for hunting or harvest their horn. Is that correct? Or I know some people will be allowed to go to South Africa to hunt for white rhino, and then they can bring the COVID back to their country. So I know for some animal right people are very aware or are angry about this. But from a scientist, I know this is the way we use the wildlife resources and magnify the profit, the benefit, and can increase a lot of profit for local people because they have to bring the hunter to the country and then provide food and hotel and maybe have a tour guide to lead this hunter, etc. So I can understand this part. But then while a lot of animal right people who is pretty against this kind of idea, hunt the rhino and then bring back etc. So I wonder, what's your opinion and what's the government or the people's opinion about this kind of activity?
So thank you very much, Professor, for that question. The rhino issue is a thing that's extremely close to my heart. And I'll get to the rhino in the last instance. Let's talk about the hunting first. The hunting, as you indicated, is a big business in South Africa. You have hunting farms where those farmers raise antelope specifically for hunting purposes. So it brings in a lot of money because it's for tourism, it's for taxidermists and all of that. So these animals, whether you raise cattle for meat or sheep for meat, they raise antelope for hunting, and that goes with that. Some people agree, some do not, but the money that they get from that is put back into conservation, and that is the one assists the other. So that is all very much controlled. For example, in the Kruger National Park, we have the elephant population because they didn't allow any more quotas for that. Because elephants can quite destroy an area around them. And the elephant population became so big that it became a problem for the Kruger Park that it was being destroyed. So, but still people were not that eager or happy to allow elephant hunting, so because they used to cull at some point, but they stopped that and then we started exporting now. So the elephants get caught and then they get exported to other African countries and they re-establish elephant herds in countries where they are not anymore. So that has been helping quite a lot to do that. The other thing is elephants die and the ivory is there. So South Africa has a huge stockpile of ivory of elephants that die in our parks because we have our elephants are not endangered. They're more than what we actually can manage. So there's a lot of ivory. So South Africa, like the same system they have with diamonds, where you can determine whether a diamond is a illegal diamond or a legally mined diamond. So they do the same with the ivory, that it is barcode, or I don't know what they do, but there's a way they can determine whether it's legal ivory or not. And then there's a time when CITES allows us to sell the ivory and then put the money back into conservation. The problem thing is the rhinoceros. Now, there was a program on National Geographic a while ago in which they were showing this whole thing about rhino poaching. And the way this is going on, we will probably, in another 10 years, there will be no more rhinos left. So you have people, there are farmers in South Africa that farm a rhino. That is, they have breeding farms for rhinos. These things are done in so much secrecy. They have full-time guards, armed guards to protect them, because the thing is that the rhinoceros is more valuable dead than alive because of that horn, which in fact means absolutely nothing. It has no medicinal qualities. It is like you grind up your nails and drink it. It's the same thing, the rhino horn. South Africa had an idea at some point to saw off the horns of the rhino. They will kill a rhino even for that little part of the horn that's left on the nose of that animal. The money you get for these horns are incredible because as long as there's a demand, there will be a supply. Now the game rangers in South Africa will tell you that these poachers that are employed by these syndicates that want these rhino horn, they can't shoot with rifles. They can't shoot the rhinos because as soon as the shot is fired, the rangers pick it up and immediately they track them and so on. So they have to cut the horns from these rhinos while they are still alive. So they run with them with an axe and they cut the horns out of the rhinos while they are still running. It is the most brutal thing you can imagine. So at the night in South Africa, when there's a full moon and no clouds, you can know rhinos are being poached incredibly. And it is something that the only way that this can be stopped is to stop the demand. And they've been, I mean, there needs to be, by the countries that import this rhino horn, should have a law to say that you cannot import rhino horn. That is the only way that we will be able to protect the rhino. Because what we do in South Africa, we can protect them with armed guards and whatever the case might be, but the rhino is still an animal that roams and needs a very large area in which it moves. So you have to have somebody walking behind this animal all the time if you want to protect it. And these guys, they are just as much a target as the rhino themselves because they will get rid of this guy very quickly, you know, and then they will get the rhino anyway. So it is something that is, as I said, is very close to my heart. And I thought when I came here that maybe I should, you know, just divert off and just talk a little bit about the rhinos because unfortunately, rhino horn, the market is in Asia. So it is very important that the countries in Asia must institute laws. I think Taiwan has a law already that you cannot import rhino horn. But all of them should institute strict legal ways of stopping this. That's the only way that we will be able to protect the rhino in the end of the day.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I see a question very good here. Maybe it will be the last one question. To what extent would South Africa impact G20 member states in terms of ocean sustainability on a global scale?
We are there, so we should talk to them. So tell them and keep on talking to them, which I'm sure we are doing. And I mean, the G20 members, they know the importance of the oceans, you know. So I think these are not so much the guilty ones. But I'm sure South Africa will do what it has to do in all of these fora to convey the message of the sustainability and the importance of the protection of the oceans. I have no doubt about that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we are so appreciate your generous and very knowledgeable and a lot of interesting story to share with us, and some about the rhino. Actually, I have heart to rhino too, so I can feel your heart, your sympathy. And so if we have no more questions, our class will be over here, and then let's give Mr. Anderson a big applause. Thank you.
Thank you.